There comes a moment in life when exhaustion is no longer physical, it's spiritual. When you've done everything right, followed every rule, fought every battle, and still nothing moves. That's the moment you start to understand. You've been trying to force what was meant to flow. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And most people live their entire lives trapped inside that resistance, chasing, controlling, manipulating, grasping. They call it ambition, but it's often fear disguised as discipline. Fear that if they stop pushing, life will forget them. Fear that if they release control, everything will fall apart. But the irony is this: life only starts to work when you stop fighting it. You were not meant to strangle your destiny into submission. You were meant to align with it. You were not sent here to conquer life like an enemy. You were sent to remember that life has always been on your side. The modern mind doesn't understand this. We've been conditioned to believe that control is power, that constant striving is virtue. We measure our worth by motion, always busy, always reaching, always dissatisfied. We wear exhaustion like a badge of honor, as if burning out means we're truly alive. But the truth is, most people aren't living. They're performing. They're caught in the anxious theater of doing, terrified to simply be. To force life is to mistrust it. It's to declare silently that you do not believe in the intelligence of existence. It's to assume that the universe requires your anxiety to function. And so, you keep pushing the river that was already flowing toward you. You keep knocking on doors that were meant to remain closed, unaware that silence is also an answer. You think you're chasing success, but what you're really running from is surrender. You're terrified of stillness because you've mistaken stillness for stagnation. But Jung would tell you stillness is not the absence of progress. It's the presence of alignment. Look around you. Everything that is alive flows effortlessly in its own rhythm. The trees do not strain to grow. The stars do not beg to shine. The ocean does not apologize for its tide. Nature doesn't force it, unfolds. It doesn't rush, it reveals. It doesn't chase, it becomes. But human beings, we fight against ourselves, against time, against the natural unfolding of our path. We try to accelerate what was meant to mature. We confuse action with evolution. We confuse control with creation. And the result? We end up out of sync with the very life we're trying to lead. We become anxious architects, building towers of plans on foundations of fear. We become so addicted to effort that we forget to listen. And that's when life starts to feel like war. But here's the truth most never learn. When you stop forcing life, it starts to move faster but smoother. Because the moment you surrender, you remove resistance. And without resistance, life flows through you, not against you. Surrender is not giving up. It is giving in to rhythm, to timing, to truth. It is not passive. It is intelligent. It's the art of saying, I trust the process more than my panic. The ego hates that. The ego thrives on control because control gives it identity. It tells itself, I am the doer. I am the cause. I am the master. But the more the ego tightens its grip, the more the soul suffocates. Because the soul knows life cannot be dominated. It can only be danced with. And to dance with life, you must first learn to hear its music. That means silence. That means patience. That means faith, not blind faith in something external, but trust in your own alignment. Jung called it synchronicity, the meaningful coincidences that begin to appear when your inner world and outer world are in harmony. You start to notice how the right people, the right words, the right moments arrive exactly when you stop chasing them, because they were never missing. You were just moving too frantically to see them. Life is not something you conquer. It's something you cooperate with. The universe does not respond to demand. It responds to alignment. And alignment comes not from effort, but from awareness. Awareness that not every door should open. Awareness that timing is as sacred as talent. Awareness that what is meant for you will find you when you are ready, not when you are restless. So stop forcing, stop grasping. Stop trying to sprint toward clarity when your soul is asking for stillness. You cannot hear guidance over the noise of desperation. You cannot receive abundance while holding on to scarcity. You cannot create miracles while controlling outcomes. The moment you loosen your grip, life takes yours gently in return. The opportunities begin to flow, not because you demanded them, but because you became receptive to them. And receptivity, that quiet openness, is the highest form of power. Look at the ocean again. It doesn't force the river to meet it. It simply waits. And everything that belongs to it finds it. When you reach that level of trust, something ancient awakens in you, a wisdom older than the mind, quieter than ambition. You begin to feel guided instead of lost. You begin to notice that the moments you thought were failures were actually detours toward precision. That the doors that closed weren't rejection, but protection. That the pain you resisted was actually sculpting the strength you needed for the path ahead. Life has never been against you. You were simply fighting its rhythm. And now that you've stopped, you can finally hear it. That silent, patient intelligence moving beneath everything, connecting the chaos into order. When you stop forcing, you return to flow. And flow is not lazy, it's efficient. It doesn't waste energy on resistance. It doesn't argue with what is. It moves with the current of truth, trusting that what's meant for it cannot miss. Jung said that most people are not living their lives, they are living the unlived life of the unconscious. They are being driven by fear, projection, unhealed wounds, by the ghosts of unmet expectations. They are forcing life through patterns that don't belong to them, chasing borrowed dreams, mimicking other people's paths, measuring worth by comparison. And that's why they suffer. Because what's forced will always fracture. What's aligned will always evolve. To stop forcing life is to stop living from the wound and start living from awareness. It is to let go of the need to prove and replace it with a desire to experience. It's to trust that what's meant for your growth will not destroy you, and what's meant to leave will not sustain you. It is to say, I don't chase, I attract. I don't demand, I align. I don't control, I collaborate. Because you've learned that power and peace are not opposites, they are partners. The most powerful force on earth is not aggression, it's surrender. The ocean does not fight the shore. The sun does not argue with the clouds. And yet, they move the world without resistance. When you stop forcing life, you become like that, quietly unstoppable. You realize that force is a symptom of fear. And flow is a sign of faith. You start noticing how much lighter you feel when you release the need to predict, how much calmer your body becomes when you stop carrying tomorrow on your shoulders. How many things begin to find you the moment you stop hunting for them. It's not luck, it's alignment. It's not magic, it's awareness. The universe doesn't delay what's meant for you. You delay it by clutching too tightly. When you loosen your grasp, you create space. And in that space, life breathes again. The mind resists that truth because it loves control. But the soul smiles because it has known it all along. This is what Jung meant when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And Cray. To stop forcing is to bring consciousness into your doing. It is to replace the arrogance of control with the humility of cooperation. It is to trust that life has been working in your favor, even in chaos, even in delay, even in loss. It is to stop fighting what's leaving and start nurturing what's staying. It is to stop demanding certainty and start practicing faith. And the paradox is, once you do, everything you were chasing starts finding you. Not because you became lucky, but because you became ready. Ready to receive instead of reach. Ready to allow instead of control. Ready to live instead of survive. You were never meant to force life into submission. You were meant to remember that you are life conscious, evolving, infinite. When you finally stop forcing, you step into flow. And flow is freedom, disguised as surrender. It's peace disguised as letting go. It's power disguised as stillness. That's when everything changes. Not because the world shifts, but because you finally did. And once that shift happens, once you stop forcing life and allow it to move through you instead of around you, something ancient within you exhales. The pressure to perform dissolves. The anxiety to prove evaporates. You stop waking up in combat with the day and begin waking up in conversation with it. You stop asking, what should I make happen today? And start asking, what is life asking of me today? And the answer always comes softly, silently, from somewhere deeper than thought. Because life is not cruel, it is communicative. It has been trying to guide you all along, whispering through intuition, nudging through delay, warning through discomfort, redirecting through endings. But when you live in force, you drown out that voice with noise. The noise of planning, pushing, panicking. Force is a kind of spiritual deafness. It shouts over wisdom. It silences intuition. It demands instead of listens. You cannot hear divine timing when you are screaming your own. You cannot sense alignment when you are consumed by agenda. You cannot receive what's yours when you are gripping what's not. And that's the tragedy of modern ambition. People think peace comes after achievement, not realizing that peace is what creates it. We have built entire civilizations on the glorification of strain. We call it progress, when in truth it is pathology, a collective compulsion to control the uncontrollable. We force love, forcing others to meet our expectations instead of meeting them in their truth. We force growth, rushing through discomfort before it has finished teaching us. We force purpose, trying to construct meaning instead of discovering it through experience. And yet, every time you have forced life, it has broken down. Every time you have surrendered, it has aligned. That is not coincidence. That is law, the law of inner equilibrium that governs all creation. The same law that turns chaos into cosmos. The same law that Jung spent his life uncovering in the human psyche. The law of opposites seeking harmony. Because every extreme, every polarity, force and flow, effort and ease, control and surrender exists for the same reason, to teach balance. And balance cannot be forced. It must be felt. The moment you feel balance, the mind relaxes its grip. It stops chasing meaning and begins living it. And that's when flow begins. Flow is not mystical, it's mechanical. It's what happens when your conscious will and your unconscious trust stop fighting. It's when your inner world and outer world begin to move in rhythm. In that state, there is no wasted energy, no fragmentation, no inner war. Everything aligns because you align. You can feel it, that quiet certainty in the chest, that grounded knowing that you don't have to hurry. Because what's meant for you isn't running away. It's orbiting, waiting for the moment your energy becomes a match. And that's the paradox. When you stop forcing, you attract faster, because your energy is no longer repelling what it craves. You stop chasing, and life starts chasing you. Not because you've given up, but because you've grown up from control to cooperation. You stop asking life to obey your plan. You start trusting life to express its intelligence through you. And that's what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming a vessel for the self, the larger intelligence of your being. Not the ego's limited agenda, but the self's infinite vision. The ego says, make it happen. The self says, let it happen through you. That's not weakness. That's the highest form of strength, to hold enough space for life to reveal itself without collapsing into fear. Because surrender is not quitting. It's courage. It's saying, I trust the unfolding more than my illusion of control. Think of every storm you've survived. Not one of them was calmed by panic. Every single one passed when you let it. Every pain that transformed you did so not because you fought it, but because you faced it. The most powerful transformations in your life happened not through force, but through awareness. That's what letting go really means. Not ignoring what is, but seeing it so clearly that you no longer need to resist it. Acceptance is not apathy, it is clarity. And clarity is creative. When you stop wasting energy resisting reality, you free that energy to reshape it. It's like unclenching a fist. Everything you were meant to hold comes naturally once you stop grasping. You don't lose control, you gain collaboration with life itself. And when you live in that space, something strange happens. The fear of loss disappears, because you realize nothing real can be lost. The love meant for you will stay. The opportunities aligned with you will remain. The experiences meant for your evolution will find you, even if they must cross oceans of coincidence to do so. When you stop forcing, you finally see how much life has already been orchestrating on your behalf, waiting only for your stillness to synchronize. You start seeing patterns everywhere, synchronicities, signs, moments of meaning so precise they feel impossible to dismiss. That is not fantasy. That is frequency. That is the rhythm of an awakened mind finally hearing its own reflection in the universe. Force was fear. Flow is faith. Force was control. Flow is conversation. Force says, I must make this happen. Flow whispers, I will meet this moment. That's the shift. You stop hunting for destiny and realize you are destiny, a living manifestation of intelligence, experience, and timing. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to awaken in me? That's when resistance transforms into revelation. Every obstacle becomes instruction. Every detour becomes direction. Every ending becomes entrance. You begin to understand that what feels like delay is divine choreography. That what feels like collapse is correction. That what feels like chaos is creation reorganizing itself through you. You realize that control was never safety, it was suffocation. And letting go was never weakness, it was the beginning of truth. When you stop forcing life, you return to rhythm, your rhythm. You no longer live on the timeline of the collective, dictated by comparison and competition. You start living from the quiet pulse of your own soul. And that pulse doesn't rush, it remembers. It remembers who you are beneath ambition. It remembers the essence that existed before fear taught you to force. That's why surrender feels like relief, because it's a return. You are not losing anything. You are coming home to yourself. And in that home, there is no panic. There is no scarcity. There is no need to prove. You don't beg for alignment. You become it. You don't chase love. You radiate it. You don't seek meaning. You embody it. That is what Jung meant by the task of the self, to bring the unconscious into harmony with the conscious. To live not as fragments of effort, but as a unified expression of being. That is the power that begins when you stop forcing life, because then you stop surviving and start participating in creation. Life moves through you like art, spontaneous, fluid, alive. You no longer fight for opportunities, you create them by existing authentically. You no longer need approval, you emanate truth. You no longer look for miracles, you become one. And when you live that way, everything, your relationships, your work, your timing aligns naturally. because you are no longer swimming against the current. You are the current. You are the river, the flow, the intelligence that was always trying to move through you. You've simply remembered how to stop resisting. You've remembered how to trust. And that trust, quiet, grounded, unshakable, changes everything. And as that trust deepens, the texture of your existence begins to change. You feel it first in your body, a lightness, a kind of quiet certainty that doesn't need reasons. Your heartbeat slows, your breath lengthens. You start to walk through the world as though it's familiar again, not because everything is predictable, but because everything is connected. You stop chasing clarity and start living in communion with it. You stop demanding proof, because experience itself becomes proof enough. There's no more bargaining with the future, no more wrestling with what is. There's simply participation, a continuous dance between you and the mystery that breathes you. That's the point where flow becomes your default state. Not the kind of flow that's manic or euphoric, but the deep, grounded awareness that every movement, every silence, every coincidence is part of something intelligent. And this is what Jung meant by living from the self, the place beyond ego, beyond fear, beyond the constant noise of wanting, the place where your actions are not reactions, but revelations. You realize you were never supposed to control life, you were supposed to align with it. And alignment doesn't mean comfort, it means truth. Sometimes the flow carries you into chaos. Sometimes it dismantles what you've built. But now you understand that destruction is also design, that the collapse of what was false is not punishment, it's purification. Force was your attempt to save what was never meant to last. Flow is your agreement to let authenticity take its place. You stop needing everything to make sense. You stop trying to calculate every outcome, because you've learned that clarity arrives after surrender, not before it. That trust is not built on certainty. It's built on awareness. And in that awareness, you begin to see the perfection of timing. You start recognizing the rhythm in your own delays. You begin to thank life for what it took away, because now you see that what was removed was never rejection, it was redirection. Life was not taking things from you. It was taking you back from things. You were never being punished, you were being positioned. Every detour was divine choreography. Every loss was an invisible alignment. Every ending was an initiation. And the moment you stop forcing, those lessons stop arriving as pain. They start arriving as peace. Because now you listen the first time. You no longer need to be broken to understand. You no longer need chaos to recognize truth. Awareness itself becomes your teacher. The way you move through the world begins to change. You become softer, not weaker, but wiser. Your presence calms rooms. Your silence speaks volumes. Because you've learned that energy communicates louder than words. And your energy now says, I trust life. You stop taking things personally. You stop clinging to outcomes. You stop expecting others to meet you where they haven't met themselves. You see that everyone is acting from their level of awareness, and that realization turns judgment into understanding. You forgive, not because people deserve it, but because you deserve peace. When you stop forcing life, forgiveness becomes effortless, not as a moral act, but as a natural state. Because once you understand that everything has served your evolution, there is nothing left to resent. Even the betrayal taught you boundaries. Even the rejection taught you worth. Even the failure taught you faith. You realize that life never breaks you. It simply breaks what isn't you. And what remains after every storm is truth, quiet, simple, undeniable truth. That's the soil real power grows from. Not power that controls, but power that creates. Not power that dominates, but power that directs. Not power that demands, but power that magnetizes. People begin to notice something different about you, though they can't explain it. You're not in a hurry. You don't chase. You don't over-explain. You're not seduced by every opportunity, because you now know that not everything that glitters is aligned. You're guided by resonance, not recognition, by vibration, not validation. You start seeing the subtle difference between effort and alignment. Effort says, I must push harder. Alignment says, I must become clearer. Effort burns energy, alignment channels it. Effort comes from fear, alignment comes from awareness. This is why some people achieve endlessly yet feel empty, while others move quietly and everything they touch blooms. Because it's not the action that creates, it's the energy behind it. Force says, I don't trust life, so I must take from it. Flow says, I trust life, so I can move with it. And when you move with life, timing stops being your enemy. The waiting becomes sacred. You begin to understand that delay is not denial, it's design. The right things can't arrive when you're still clinging to the wrong energy. The universe doesn't withhold, it waits until you're ready. And readiness isn't about preparation. It's about vibration. It's when your inner frequency finally matches what you've been asking for. You can't fake that. You can't rush that. You can only become that. That's why the moment you stop forcing, doors open on their own. People appear. Paths reveal themselves. What once felt impossible starts to feel inevitable. Because nothing aligned with your soul ever requires strain, it only requires sincerity. And yet, you'll still be tested, not by life's cruelty, but by its precision. It will send you echoes of your old patterns to see if you still react or if you can finally remain. It will whisper familiar fears to see if you still chase them. It will show you temptation in the form of urgency to see if you've learned the art of divine patience. Every test of surrender asks the same question. Will you force again or will you flow? If you choose flow, something extraordinary happens. Peace becomes your baseline. You no longer need certainty to feel safe. You no longer need outcomes to feel worthy. You no longer need to understand everything to trust it. You start existing in what mystics called the unforced rhythm of grace. It's a rhythm that moves through you when your mind stops interrupting life's wisdom. It's the rhythm of nature, of intuition, of divine timing, the rhythm of reality itself, when it's not distorted by fear. You become a mirror for others. People feel your steadiness and remember their own. They feel your calm and start questioning their chaos. Your presence becomes permission to rest, to trust, to breathe again. Because by embodying surrender, you teach it wordlessly. That's how consciousness spreads, not through convincing, but through example. Not by speaking louder, but by vibrating higher. Your calm becomes rebellion in a culture addicted to control. Your peace becomes revolution in a world obsessed with proving. You remind people that they were never supposed to force life, they were supposed to feel it. And when you live like this long enough, miracles stop being miracles, they become normal. Synchronicities become daily. Clarity becomes constant. You stop doubting. You stop chasing. You start co-creating, because now you're not separate from life. You are life. You are the consciousness that was once trying to control the current, now moving as the current itself. And in that oneness, there is no force left, only flow, only freedom, only faith. That's the moment everything changes. Not because you gained power, but because you finally stopped pretending you ever needed it. And from that moment onward, you begin to live differently. You walk lighter. You speak slower. You listen more deeply, not just to people, but to life itself. You begin to see that there was never anything to chase, because everything meant for you was already orbiting you, waiting for you to become still enough to receive it. You understand now that the universe was never withholding anything, you were just gripping too tightly to things that were meant to pass. The moment you released your demand for control, You made space for everything real to enter. And what entered was not more things, but more clarity. You can finally see that what left you was not loss, it was liberation. You can finally understand that every delay was mercy, every rejection was redirection, every ending was evolution. Jung said that people don't heal by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And that's what surrender does. It brings the unconscious grasping into awareness. It shows you every place your fear was pretending to be ambition. It exposes every illusion your ego built in the name of progress. And when you see that clearly, you can't go back. Because the moment truth enters your awareness, forcing becomes impossible. You realize that control was never love, it was fear trying to wear a noble mask. You realize that striving was never growth, it was survival pretending to be purpose. And you realize that your greatest strength was never your willpower, it was your willingness to let go. You stop demanding that life obey you. You start asking, what is life trying to teach me through this? And the answers come effortlessly, because you're no longer shouting over them. The days begin to feel different. You stop rushing through mornings as if life exists only in the next moment. You start to savor stillness, coffee in silence, sunlight on your hands, the soft rhythm of breath that used to go unnoticed. You start to notice synchronicities again, the right song playing at the right moment, the unexpected message, the stranger's smile that feels familiar. You start to trust timing again, and because of that, time stops feeling like an enemy. You learn that the right things do not need to be forced, they unfold. The right people do not need to be chased, they align. The right path does not need to be fought for, it appears the moment you're ready to walk it, because surrender is readiness, and readiness is alignment. You no longer pray for specific outcomes. You pray for clarity, for courage, for trust. You no longer ask for ease. You ask for awareness. You no longer try to change the world. You allow the world to change you. And when it does, you begin to notice something even more miraculous. Everything you once chased in desperation starts chasing you in peace. Not because you manipulated it into existence, but because you became its equal in vibration. That's what it means to attract, not to pull, but to resonate. To stop being separate from what you seek and start becoming the space where it can exist. You become magnetic, but you don't notice. Because your focus isn't on what's arriving, it's on what is. You're no longer driven by scarcity, but sustained by sufficiency. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone, because worth no longer feels like a negotiation. It feels like breath, quiet, constant, and yours by nature. And this is the secret that all the mystics, the sages, the philosophers have been trying to teach through every era. That the universe is not something outside of you, it is within you. When you fight life, you fight yourself. When you trust life, you trust yourself. Because the two are not separate. They never were. And now you understand. Forcing was fear, pretending to be control. Flow is love, remembering its nature. The universe doesn't rush, and yet everything is accomplished. You don't need to rush either. You don't need to grasp or chase or struggle your way into destiny. You only need to become still enough for destiny to recognize you. So when your plans fall apart, breathe. When doors close, pause. When people leave, bless them. When silence comes, listen. Because sometimes what looks like nothing is life rearranging everything. You have learned that peace isn't something you find when everything is perfect. It's what you discover when you stop needing perfection to feel alive. You have learned that you can let go and nothing real will leave you. You have learned that you can surrender and still stand strong. And you have learned that letting life lead was never the end of your power. It was the beginning of your freedom. So walk lightly now, not as one who must conquer, but as one who has already arrived. Let the river move you and trust its current. because the river is wiser than the stone that resists it. It bends, it flows, it finds its way, and it always reaches the ocean. And so will you, not by forcing, not by fighting, but by remembering what you were before the world taught you to fear stillness. A current of consciousness moving effortlessly toward its own becoming. That is your true state. That is your natural rhythm. And that is where everything changes. Not when you force life to move, but when you finally allow it to flow through you, free, effortless, divine.